Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2016 biopic romantic drama titled A United Kingdom. Now, A United Kingdom runs for 1 hour and 51 minutes long. It is directed by Amma Asante. The script was written by Guy Hibbert. It is based off of the novel Color Bar by Susan Williams. It is produced by Brunson Green, Charlie Mason, Rick McCollum, Cameron McCracken, Justin Moore Louis, and David Oylowo. The score was composed by Patrick Doyle, the cinematography by Sam McCurdy, and it was edited by Jonathan Amos and John Gregory. And the stars of the movie are David Oylowo, Rosamund Pike, Terry Pheto, Vusi Kunene, Anton Lesser, Jack Davenport, Jack Lowden, Nicholas Rowe, Draco Malfoy himself, Tom Felton, Charlotte Hope, Nicholas Lyndhurst, Anastasia Hille, Laura Carmichael, and Jessica Oylowo. Now, what did I think of this movie? Well, inspired by actual events, even though we don't know if it's 100% historically accurate because it could be based on a lot of dramatic licensing, like in a lot of movies that are inspired by true events. You probably don't know the full picture unless you've actually were at the moment. Unless you lived the moment. That's what I'm trying to say. But it's still inspired by actual events. A United Kingdom concentrates on the heir to the throne of an African country that is a protectorate of Great Britain called Bechuanaland, which would later become the Republic of Botswana after it broke away from the British Dominion in 1966. It would become, Botswana. But until then, it's got the more complicated name of Bechuanaland. Alright, the heir to the throne is a young man named Stitatsi Kama, played by David Oylowo, who back in 1947 was studying law at Oxford in Great Britain. He falls in love with a young Caucasian woman named Ruth Williams, played by Rosamund Pike, who works as a secretary for the London Missionary Society. Their love for each other eventually leads to them getting married. Saretsi wants Ruth to return to his country, but their love for each other is disapproved of by everyone that they knew. His black relatives don't approve of him dating and marrying a white woman. And back when Britain was really up to its elbows in racial discrimination of having their people marrying someone who isn't of British descent. Like I said, back in the 40s, biracial couples was pretty much taboo. Today, it's welcomed with open arms and is encouraged. But back in the 40s, a whole different era. And there was a lot of divinity within his family and her family not approving of them falling in love and getting married. But it's through great strengths and great lengths that these two stay true to each other. She found her soulmate. He found his soulmate. And throughout all the animosity and divinity, they managed to have a long, cherished, fruitful marriage until death drew them apart. like all good, solid, cohesive marriages. Marry till the bitter end, as I always say. And that they did. And it was through this marriage, of course, that also led to a more shift in the political structure of Bechuanaland, and also caused a divinity within the country that would be later Botswana and Great Britain. And it would take many, many decades for them to reconcile. But it was through strength and determination from both Seretse and Ruth that they formed a strong bond, which was also pivotal in Bechuanaland breaking away from British ties to becoming its own independent country. Just like her previous outing, Belle, director Amma Asante created yet another real-life story about true romance met in the realms of conflict and controversy, but succeeded in climbing over these hurdles and shows that true love bears no boundaries. Sure, the couple has to overcome racism and disapproval from both their people, both their relatives and friends who didn't approve of them being together as a couple. They were made for each other, and they ensured that nobody would stop them, even going as so far in the end when one side eventually would learn to accept. That was the people of Bechuanaland who, after several bouts of fear and doubt, became acceptance. And I think this movie is something that is very rarely ever taught in schools and should be also being taken into certain accounts. I mean, the movie has a juxtaposition between romance, politics, and also some levels of issues involving racial discrimination and how they've overcome these racial barriers and how they climbed over the hurdles and the obstacles that was getting in the way of their true relationship. Both films tend to run for an hour and 41 minutes long, even though I think this one was more like an hour and 51, but who's counting the time? This is not a movie where you could just look at your watch and wondering when this movie is over, because there's always something very interesting going on in this movie. So you're not really actually looking at the time of anything. And it shows that Asante will not tolerate wasted minutes of nothing in her movies. Every scene has a purpose, and she ensures you that every scene has something with meaning, something with symbolism. Every scene serves a purpose, and the editing is something we truly have to appreciate. The script was handled professionally, and Asante seems confident in the script that's given to her and has no need to add something at the last minute, making issues feel forced or awkward. But what makes A United Kingdom stand above a lot of politically themed movies is the outstanding, powerful performance of David Oyelowo. David Oylowo, himself a black African from Britain, who also is ironically married to a white British woman. So he's actually probably speaking from his own experiences and had to also face the hurdles of discrimination from his side of the family and from his wife Jessica's side of the family. And they have been married for quite some time and they have 4 children of their own. So he's speaking from his own experience. So I actually thought it was great. I'm not sure if it was Asante's decision to cast David Oylowo, but maybe the casting director chose him because he's speaking from his own experiences. And that's what actually makes this movie all the more powerful. So when he makes an address to his people in Bakawana land, the fiery intensity in his eyes manifests with determination, knowing that his journey to becoming a leader will be a tough road ahead. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy. But he will stop at nothing to get his message across. The speeches he delivers will likely get fans in tears because his messages are moving and also very inspirational. And it goes to show you that even though he is soon to become the heir to his throne in the kingdom of Botswana, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's just going to not make anything out of it instead of just to be like, oh, I'm an inheritance to royalty. I don't have to do virtually anything. No, the reason why he's taking law and law courses is simply because he wants to be a leader that actually has some meaning behind it. That he really wants to sort of realm himself into the political spectrum. And so by studying law, it just makes perfect sense. If he's going to be a leader, then he should act like a leader, and that law is his ticket in to becoming a powerful, prominent leader. His voice is enough to make your heart melt like a hot knife through butter. And it seems that Oylowo and Asante have known each other for a very long time, and they both seem confident in selecting, and she seemed confident in selecting who would lead her next film, and she knows the capabilities that her leading performer will guarantee the best performance in her movie. The love for both Saretse and Ruth did not go by very smoothly. Just like I probably would have expected and anticipated. There was going to be a lot of racial tensions because, back in the 40s and 50s, biracial relationships was pretty much taboo. The segregation in the United States made it quite obvious. The elitism in Britain made it virtually impossible. Social acceptance has come a very, very long way. In fact, the rough trenches seem more than most other romantic comedies, even though this movie isn't really a romantic comedy, it's more like a romantic drama. There are some levels of comedy, but few and far between. In spite of everyone surrounding them seem to be unhappy with their relationship, they never once let their guards down. It's like pushing flies off your shoulder type of thing. Like that. They may not accept us, but we just simply don't give a fuck. Instead, they hold on to each other throughout until one of the parties gladly accepted them and became obscure pioneers in making the British protected colony of Africa into an independent country years down the road. There are a myriad of scenes where the racial intentions are disgraceful in its presentation, even going as far when a bunch of bigoted hoodlums were spewing off racist banter towards Saretse even going far as to labeling Ruth with unflattering gestures. But in these scenes, thanks to Asante's direction and Guy Hibbert's script, they don't go as far as to make it obvious, and it's never rubbed in our faces. This movie does keep it subtle. They're not going into like the direction where black is good and white is evil. No. But what they are going through is the fact that just because they're of a different race doesn't mean they're of a different species. And that if one party member, if one side accepts the others for who they are or for who they are as a couple, then consider that a victory. Which is the reason why Ruth decided to live in Bakuana land with Zaretsi and to raise their children in peace and harmony and acceptance. So after going full out in Gone Girl, Rosamund Pike settles to a more relaxed and nuanced performance. During the whole ordeal of falling in love with someone, regardless of their skin color, she always remained calm. She didn't go into like a full-blown speech or some cliched, tearful diatribe. No. She knew that there was going to be trouble, but she just wasn't going to let her guard down. And rightfully so. Instead of expressing her thoughts in words, she expresses her thoughts through the use of body language that's very symbolic. Shaking her arm or something. It shows that she is brave at standing up to someone she truly loves, but she could still be quite vulnerable and nervous at knowing that the masses are not too humble in expressing their disapproval of the choice she made, making her character all the more believable. I mean, if she just remained stoic and stone-faced, it would have just took the whole narrative of this movie apart quite substantially. Fortunately, that she didn't let that happen, and fortunately the script didn't make that possible either. So, while keeping her brave and keeping her to some levels of vulnerability, she is as real as she can come. And it's probably something I would have expected from the character of Ruth Williams. But her unrequited love for her prince is really all that matters to her, and in the end, she's brave enough to stand up to the hate. Even going too far as to just accepting the consequences that her father proposed to her, that if she marries this black guy, who will one day become an heir to the throne, to become a powerful leader, oh, he doesn't care. If she marries him, she is disowned. I know that sounds hard. I know that sounds terrible. But unfortunately, she knew that this was the reality that she was going to face. But you know what? She couldn't care less. She's going to marry the person she loves. And that racial tensions and divinity is not going to stand in her way. Now, even though the movie is mostly around David Oylowo and Rosamund Pike's performances, how did the supporting cast go? When it comes to the supporting cast, of course, the real standouts include Tom Felton, who of course we all know as Draco Malfoy from the Harry Potter movies. He's a standout for the character of Rufus Lancaster. And what a coincidence that Tom himself ends up playing a bigoted buffoon in Amma Asante's previous project, Belle. And once again, he's quite convincing as a character who had a similar frame of mind like the people in this time period. Jack Lowden is wonderful as the only character who is in support of Saritse's love for Ruth. His role is like a sigh of relief coming from a wide variety of hateful characters. It didn't matter whether you were black, it didn't matter whether you were white or in between or somewhere in between. There are a lot of hateful characters who do not approve of their wedding of them getting married. But Lowden's character, who by the way was Caucasian, he actually felt that race should not be a divinity of who people should fall in love with. Nicholas Lyndhurst was also effective in his performance as Ruth's father, who doesn't want Ruth to marry Saritse. Now, even though you could just generally point fingers and hate this guy for who he was, but you still have to take some level of pity for him due to the fact that he's wallowing in his own ignorance. And that maybe someday he will learn to accept his daughter, who she wants to choose to fall in love with and marry. And maybe somewhere down the line, he will accept her. Maybe he just needs more time. See, it just goes to show you that even through the most racially tensive characters in this movie, I don't think we should actually start pointing fingers and promoting hate. Because whether you agree with the things that people are saying and whether you're disagreeing with them, one thing for sure, everyone has a right to their opinions, and to each their own. You may not like what they're saying, you may not agree with what they're saying or what they're doing, but as an individual, as a member of the human race, it's just all in a matter of their opinions. Let them wallow in their ignorance. I'm sorry that that's the way they feel. Nothing really that we can do about it. So a United Kingdom reflects back to an unpleasant moment in history. It was a time when South Africa proposed the Apartheid Act and the shameless support that Great Britain had for it. Under all the abuse that came through this, one thing we could all be proud of is that several trailblazers had successfully overcome this burden, and that is where we applaud Saritse and Ruth. The levity that comes with this movie is something that should be taught in classes in school, regardless of how heavy-handed the topic is. If we want to go into world history, we should look at world history from all 7 continents. Well, except for Antarctica. But maybe we can do a few things on Antarctica, huh? Maybe talk about how penguins migrated there, or prehistoric dinosaurs may have lived on Antarctica. So, Amma Asante made this movie in 2016 at a time when romantic stories are not as popular then as it was, like, say, in the 1990s. It's a romantic tale that is something of great importance. It's not just some boy meets girl love story. This romantic story was also of what brought a country together to form a nation free from British rule. That even though it might drive two worlds apart, but once the smoke clears, the film ends up telling us that these two are in love and that nothing else matters. And even though the moral of the story might not be original, it's still warming and has a lot of positive integrity going for it. So, with a dynamic chemistry between the two leads, an outstanding supporting cast, and the crew were at their A game, this movie is definitely a winner to me. A very underrated political drama mixed with romance and also social issues as well. It's not a one dimensional romantic tale of sentimental mush. This romantic tale actually has an interesting story to go with the narrative, and I highly recommend you to see this movie. So, therefore, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give A United Kingdom a 9 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the three simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Carrot Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.